Good afternoon, good evening, and good night, or good morning, everybody. My name is Bill Woodcock,
And I'm Steve Hunt.
and you are watching or listening to the second season premiere of But Before We Go, the podcast by Gen X, about Gen X, before everybody. And Steve, we have demonstrated over these past couple of months how little we care about our viewing and listening audience because we wound up taking a 6 week break between episodes. But it's all good. And we are here to come back to you all in viewer and listener land and bring with you fresh topicality. And Steve, I think the place to stay because we do such a good job on talking about things that are contemporaneous in our lives is since this is not just the first episode of the new season, but the first episode of the second quarter of the 21st century, let's talk about all things New Year's. What do you say?
Let's go for it. And you know what? We took a break, but we're back. We can still talk about but before we go, because as you can see, we have not gone. So let's do this.
We're tan, rested, and ready, some of us more than others. So So, so with that, New Year's Eve. New Year's Eve has had so I see this podcast in two parts. New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. And so New Year's Eve has had a various connotation over I know my 57 years on this earth. I can remember as a kid, the only show in town was New Year's in New York, in Times Square. We watched television shows. We watched Dick Clark's Rockin' New Year's Eve. There was the CBS New Year's Eve with Guy Lombardo and his Royal Canadians.
Oh, God,
You
you went
know,
deep there.
oh, I went to the Big Bang era.
Yeah.
Johnny Carson just did New Year's Eve on his own because he was so badass. He didn't need any fucking special. He was sitting there in Burbank doing the Tonight Show, and he would just do New Year's Eve. And at 2 minutes of, he'd go, let's go to New York City where they're about to drop the ball. And then that would be it because he was Johnny Carson. And so I can remember it being a glorified variety show, Lola Falana and that ilk, Charo, those sorts of level of celebrities performing. Then New Year's Eve started to get fancy. You started to have local station cut-ins on New Year's Eve. So, in our area, Steve, the Baltimore Inner Harbor or the National Mall in DC, because there would be other things. There would be other competing New Year's Eve specials. Lo, do I remember the years when the Howard Stern New Year's special was on. And we either watched it if we weren't being cheap that year on pay-per-view cable, or we watched it on Scramble Vision. I can remember one year a whole house full of people watching it on Scramble Vision because we were all too cheap. So then there was that. And then CNN got into the fray with Anderson Cooper and Kathy Griffin live from Times Square. And New Year's Eve, it had just started at like 11:30 after the local news. Now it was on start. Then when Howard came on, it was starting at 9 or 10. Now New Year's Eve started at 8. And then came the Y2K. And everybody thought the world was going to blow up. They all thought we were going to die. And so we needed to monitor Y2K around the world in order to catch the end of civilization. And who brought that to us? Once again, CNN. So we had at 6 in the morning, Eastern Standard Time, the New Year's from Tokyo at
Mhm.
8 in the morning, from Sydney, and then so forth and so forth and so forth and so forth in each of the time zones of the world, going through Asia, Africa, Europe. until it came back to Times Square. And amazingly, Steve, lo and behold, the world did not end. And so that's where we are. That's where we are. That's how we grew up. That's the time period of this podcast. But Steve, I think we should still go forward. So Steve,
Mhm.
before we do that, just please stop and reflect on your first 35 years plus of New Year's Eve.
Well, a couple of things, Bill. It's funny how when you get to our stage in life, you go from watching it on TV, then you're a young adult, and maybe I don't know about you, but there were some years where I actually went out for New Year's Eve, and now at my age, I'm back home watching it on TV. It's funny how everything just kind of circles back to that. Um, I will say also, you talked about CNN, and I was struck this New Year's Eve, and maybe I just hadn't caught it before, but they run New Year's Eve all day now. I turned it on, New Year's Eve at 8 in the morning because I was working. I wanted some background noise, so I put on the news. And yeah, they literally ran the fireworks from all over the world. I'm like, so y'all aren't even worried about news. You're just going to give us New Year's Eve from across the planet now. And you're right. When my memories as a kid was trying to stay up until Dick Clark came on, because being a younger kid, it was all about Dick Clark because he would have your more contemporary artists. It was Dick Clark because so we all knew him from American Bandstand. That was my go-to was Dick Clark. Um, you are right about Carson, and that could almost be a whole other episode now that I think about it of how much of a king Johnny Carson was. He really was that dude. He really was all
Johnny
that.
Carson was a pimp.
He
He was a pimp. No one effed with Carson.
Yeah, but he was like, but anyway, he was the king. But yeah, it was all about Dick Clark. It was, how can I make it until 11:30 to watch some Dick Clark, and then you watch it however long you can after New Year's, and you would see this is obviously pre MTV, so that was one of the few opportunities you could see maybe your favorite artists on TV because there weren't videos playing all day from your favorite artists. So those were my memories, and then my parents would usually go out. I had older brothers who didn't go out, so my parents would go off and do something, and we'd just be in the house by ourselves hanging out. Maybe watch some Scramble Vision until Dick Clark came on, and you know what I'm talking about with the Scramble Vision there.
A
But
little, a little not adult content is what we were talking about. You weren't watching boxing matches.
no, we weren't. We weren't watching reruns of the Brady Bunch. That's for damn sure. So we would kind of do our own thing until New Year's. There was the one year where my parents had a house party for New Year's Eve, which was epic. Like my parents were them. My parents and their friends had the best house parties, and one year they decided to do it for New Year's Eve, which was cool, except for the fact that we were stuck in the back of the house while the grown folks were up front partying. But we would be able to go up front and get food and hang out. And so we kind of had our own party in the back in our bedrooms with food from the party. So those were my memories. It was mostly TV. There was the one year where there was a party at our house, but I just remember it was Times Square, and you waited to see the ball dropped. And for a lot of years, the ball design would change, so you would want to see what that looked like. Um, I remember when they I remember I don't know what the first year was they added Hollywood to the celebration. So, you had the Hollywood celebration, and always found that funny because at midnight New York, they would go to California and they'd be hugging to it. I'm like, it ain't midnight out there. So that was always a funny moment of that piece. But that was really the big thing. It was all about Dick Clark, and there were a few years where I did not make it to Dick Clark because I was tired. But that was the whole challenge was make it to Dick Clark.
See, and in my household, it was not about Dick Clark. It was about Carson.
Hmm.
And I mean, Johnny Carson was the balls. And I mean, he was the king of late night television. And when, when they switched over to Jay Leno and then, you know, uh, then Conan O'Brien, then back to Leno, and now Jimmy Fallon. I mean, yeah, the whole thing about the Tonight Show is a totally separate episode in itself. And I mean, the reason that there's Saturday Night Live is because Johnny Carson was under pressure from NBC to go on 6 days a week, and he said, "F you." And if you don't like it, I'll go to ABC and be their talk show. And they decided to put a different show on Saturday night. I mean, nobody has that power in television anymore. It was amazing, but that was the cool show for us because as was said many a time by my ancestors, what a bunch of fools standing around there just watching a ball drink. And where are they going to pee anyway? That seemed to be a real big issue of concern in my household. Where are all the people in Times Square going to pee? And it's really never a thing I considered. And I had to experience for myself. So New Year's Eve 1989, I actually went to Times Square. I was a good
Oh.
solid 6 blocks away.
Hmm.
I, could see the ball drop if I craned my neck around the side of a building. And I'm happy to admit that I was able to pee. And there was a spot pot that was available. And proud to say I used it. So, that answer and those fears were responded to, and I was happy to be able to bring back to my family that indeed it is possible for the people in Times Square to pee.
Well, I would always think about the years where it was colder than hell. you know, New Year's, obviously being in our on the East Coast in our country, the weather can vary. You can have some relatively mild ones, but I would always think about the whole Times Square thing. To your point, on those New Year's Eve where it was like pushing zero, whether it's wind chill or just naturally, and I'm sitting here in my warm house and Dick Clark is all bundled up and everything, and you see all these people and just this big cloud of smoke from everybody's breath because it's again it's colder than hell, and my first thought was, are these people freaking crazy? I mean, I've got friends of mine from New York that have never been because they're like, that's some crazy shit there, man. So, yeah, I would think about that as well. On those particular nights, is it really worth it? I think I can appreciate the new year and ringing it in um, from the comfort of my own home. Thank you very much. Uh, the one thing you talked about, Bill, that God, I almost forgot about till you mentioned was Y2K. Um, I had the misfortune of running an IT shop that year. And so we basically, there were three guys, each of them did an 8-hour shift. And basically, we went 24 by 7 from December 30th through January the 2nd. And literally, they sat in the server room to make sure shit still ran. And we all had our cell phones, and I went out with friends to a house party New Year's Eve that year. I think Y2K I was turning 35 that year. So out at a party, phone strapped to my hip, waiting for it to ring. Because, of course, the world was going to end. So my phone's going to ring to tell me the world ended, right? I don't know what sense that made, right? But I just remember getting a call at 12:15 from whichever one of my guys was there saying, everything's still up and running. I'm like, okay, now I'm going to go back to drink and go home. But that was
That's
nuts.
a very good point. He who says we don't have enough material for episodes, Y2K is rich
Yeah.
with material. I mean, what a bunch of nothing that was.
Oh,
Y2K. I mean, yeah, it was cool that the year turned to 2000, but cross the 19 off your checks and write 220. I mean, it basically is what that's what the world did. But
Yeah.
we digress. But you know, going back to New Year's gone by, I think it's time to maybe bring that forward
Mhm.
because as we have become adults and have families of our own, New Year's has graduated. Um, I believe that people now are generally more tuned in to the fact that you really should not do risky behaviors on New Year's Eve. You should not go out drinking and driving. And of course, this year on New Year's Eve, drove into a three-car pileup on the Capitol Beltway that delayed my drive home by about 30 minutes. That was joyous. And it was a particularly messy accident as well. But New Year's entertainment has become more plentiful. Like as and yes, with the start of the new century, New Year's started to become a global experience. And it wasn't just CNN that was capturing it, it was all the stations that started to capture it. And so, a thing that has gone on more recently in New Year's is that people celebrate the new year at different hours, you know, um, for various reasons. Some people said some in some towns, and I can think of the place where I live, and I could think of the town of Easton on the eastern shore of
Mhm.
Maryland, about an hour away from me. They will celebrate their New Year's at 7 p.m. or at 9 p.m. And in order for families to participate
Mhm.
and to get home, to go to another celebration, or just, to mark the new year in their own private way at home, or just to go to fuck to sleep. And so that's a way that the risk of New Year's Eve has been mitigated. Something that I really found enjoyable and fun that I did for the first time this past year was I went to a British New Year's party. A British themed party, and I happened to go with some Brit friends, and they don't drop a ball at 7 p.m., which is midnight in Britain. Big Ben tolls,
Hmm.
and then fireworks come up over the Thames, and the whole thing was available live streaming on BBC over YouTube. It was
Hmm.
a blast. It was really a lot of fun. You got in your share of New Year's Eve merriment, and then also you were able to leave at a sane hour, not risk yourself on the highway too badly, and get home in order to do something else.
Hmm.
And in my case, got home and sat out, had a wonderful fire pit on the deck, had great company, great conversation, and really enjoyed myself. So one would wonder if maybe in the future that becomes a thing.
Mhm.
You know, how about if we go to our favorite sushi Chinese restaurant for dim sum on New Year's Eve and celebrate New Year's in Beijing, or sushi at 8 a.m. as they drop the ball in Tokyo. That would be cool. So, Steve, now that you're a grown up, fairly responsible adult with family, what sort of merriment opportunities do you look for in your New Year's Eve?
Well, we some friends of mine from college. There's a couple that actually lives in the college town. Um, they host a New Year's Eve party every year, and we've basically went to the great state of Delaware, with the exception of COVID, because COVID was COVID. Um, every year since I believe 2003, maybe 2002. Um, and it's about an hour and a half drive. So, we pack up our stuff and, me and the family. my wife, 2 kids. We drive up there on New Year's Eve. We get there around 5 o'clock. We do a full, multi-course dinner. Everybody brings something. Um, After dinner, obviously full bar because these folks have a big enough house with multiple rooms, so each family got a room. Um, so we'd stay overnight, so there was no driving home, and we have a full dinner. Sit down. Um, Afterwards, we always play like a trivia game, and the hosts are really good about coming up with these wacky trivia games. They change the subjects every year, and we do that. They've got a pool table downstairs, so we'll have like a pool tournament, like a 2-on-2 tournament. And then, we have New Year's Eve blasting on the TV. And then at 12 o'clock, we do the Happy New Year thing. And then after New Year's, and admittedly, we've had a few to drink by then, we fire up the karaoke on, I forget what TV channel you could go to get karaoke, but he figures this out every year. And we do some drunken karaoke until about 2 a.m. So that's been the tradition for years. It has mellowed out as we've gotten older. Our voices don't hold up as long as they used to. But and the cool thing is we've been able to watch the kids grow up through the years. My daughter, who is now old enough to go out on her own, decided, you know what? You talked about how there's less going out in these days. I was like, "You gonna go out somewhere?" She goes, "No, I'm just gonna go with you guys because those people out there are crazy." Like, I've raised a semi-responsible kid. Yay! But that is our tradition: is we go to Delaware and hang out with friends, and it's
And do you stay over in Delaware?
yes, yeah. We come back New Year's Day, so
Very good.
we come. Yeah, we stay New Year's Eve. We get up New Year's and that's the other thing. I know we're gonna talk about New Year's Day. We get up New Year's Day. We have everybody has breakfast. We pack up and probably around noonish, we're all on the road to our respective home states.
Respective home states. You sound so continental.
I know, right? Um, by the way, Bill, one thing I wanted to throw out there for New Year's Eve before we turn to New Year's Day, the one thing I do like about New Year's Eve is it is a world event. Um, and there seems to be a really good competition on who has the best fireworks. As I watch the different celebrations, Sydney, Australia is like they just have it down because the way they do it over the bridge and the river and everything. You mentioned London. I think was it Dubai? I think set the record for like 35 straight minutes of fireworks this year. That seems to be a thing. And I think it's only possible because it is a world event. I mean, we have fireworks on the 4th of July, but I don't necessarily see the Brits setting off fireworks on that day to celebrate. So that's kind of a cool thing that we see on New Year's Eve now with the world celebrations, the different fireworks shows.
Sydney's fireworks show over the Opera House is pretty damn awesome.
Yeah.
So, that's my word. So, New Year's Day. We have about 7 minutes left in this fine production today. So, let's talk a little bit about New Year's Day. Here's the thing that pisses me off about New Year's Day. They've changed New Year's Day a lot more than New Year's Eve. New Year's Eve, you get all your merriment in, and I think what we've demonstrated in this episode is that the merriment has taken different forms. It's evolved. I mean, but yet our kids can take advantage of the same forms of merriment that we had. Dick Clark is now gone, but now there's Ryan Seacrest. Jimmy Kimmel, it's Jimmy Fallon now, not Johnny Carson. But, CBS rolls on, CNN does their thing, but it's the same stuff. New Year's Day has been fucked with, and I don't appreciate it. And it was brought up to me yesterday. The Orange Bowl football game this year is on the 9th of January. I used to sit around all day on New Year's as a sports watching child and adult and look forward to the freaking Orange Bowl at 8 o'clock at night on New Year's Day. Because this is what you did. You watched the Rose Parade from 11 to 1. Then you watched the Cotton Bowl from 1:30 to 4:30. Then you watched the granddaddy of them all, the Rose Bowl, from 5 until 8. Then you watched the Orange Bowl from 8 o'clock until whenever you ran out of steam. And they started to mess with us when they started to give us shit like the Tostitos Fiesta Bowl, the Gator Bowl, all these secondhand bowls that nobody gives a fuck about on New Year's Day. And it's all because of money and it's all TV revenue and it's all because television networks. But damn it, here are the college bowl games that matter: the orange, the rose, the sugar, the cotton. That's it. One of them was always New Year's Eve, and you could watch that on New Year's Eve before you went out and did your partying. And then the other three were on New Year's Day. You never farted with that. And damn it, they farted with that. I love that they have the college football playoff, but now, and that's a whole separate topic, but now that damn thing goes until the 20th of January. And the damn Orange Bowl, and what is it? What's the other bowl? I think it's the Fiesta Bowl.
Mhm.
They aren't until I forget what bowl it is. I think Fiesta Bowl happened. Anyway, there's some the Cotton Bowl. Now the Cotton Bowl and the Orange Bowl aren't until the 9th and 10th of January. America means college football on New Year's Day, Steve.
Absolutely. And you're right. Money has screwed up a lot of things. I mean, I love my NFL football, but Christmas Day I watch. It's about the NBA. That was Christmas Day. You watch some hoops. You did not watch football. So that's an example. But to your New Year's Day tradition, absolutely, man. I was going to say, and I will say it here, my New Year's Day was about two things, the two F's: food and football. That was it. You basically got up, you were a slug pretty much the day. Even if you were a youngster and you didn't drink a thing, you were up until 2 in the morning when you're normally not up until 2 in the morning, so you're tired anyway. And like my mom would just have like snack stuff around the house. Like my dad always loved to make deviled eggs, so he would make some deviled eggs, chips, dip, and we didn't have anybody over, but she would just have stuff out so we could munch on all day while watching football. And then dinner was usually timed around halftime of the Rose Bowl. So you get your plate and you go back in the family room, because that was one of the few occasions where we didn't have to eat at the table because it was football. You get your plate, go into the family room and had some folding tables and chairs, and you continue to watch football. College football, that was what you did. And you're right. It was the Rose Bowl parade. It was the three bowls. You're right. Cotton, rose, orange. I think at some point the Sugar Bowl became a New Year's night thing to rival the Orange Bowl. A little network rivalry there. But that was it. That's what you did. And the thing that kills me is you have these the playoff games are at the bowl sites, and they still call them the bowls. And at the end of the game, they give you a trophy. So you've just won a second round playoff game at the Orange Bowl. Here's your Orange Bowl trophy. I'm like, you got more games to play. What the hell is that? You're right. The whole playoff thing, I would have loved for them to just say, if you want to play at the bowl sites, fine, play there. Don't call them the bowls. Still have the bowls on New Year's Day. If it's the second place Big Ten team versus the third place SEC team, so be it. You can do both. You can walk and chew gum at the same time, and you can still make money. I'm going to stop because I'm with you, Bill. I hate it. It totally screwed up what was a perfectly good day of being a complete slug. That was Slug Day, and they have messed with the program.
I don't know if this ever even happened. I don't know if this bowl matchup ever even happened, but the Rose Bowl used to be the Big Ten team versus the Pac-10 team.
Right.
And I guess this never happened because both of these teams I'm going to mention are from neither conference. But in my adult brain, Heath Jackson on ABC Sports
Whoa, no.
in his yellow blazer would announce the granddaddy of them all, the Rose Bowl game, as Bear Bryant and Alabama go into the Rose Bowl Stadium in beautiful Pasadena, California, to face the Oklahoma Sooners, champions of the Big 12. Note, I did not say Big 10 or Pac 10, but somewhere in my brain, Keith Jackson is announcing a mythical Rose Bowl game between Alabama and Oklahoma.
Well, you got to have that because he could talk about Bear Bryant, and then and you could either go with Oklahoma or Nebraska because he's going to talk about those big horses up front, because they corn fed out there, so he's going to talk about the big uns up front. He's going to give you some whoa Nellies. Oh my God, Keith Jackson, if
You
Johnny
want to talk about a pimp? There was a pimp right there.
If Dick Clark / Johnny Carson were New Year's Eve, Keith Jackson was New Year's Day.
Yes,
That was the voice
was.
of New Year's Day. And just as you started to fade a little bit from the night before and maybe watching a crap game with the Cotton Bowl, that voice would come on and they would show that view, the one they always show from the mountains behind the stadium with the sun setting and shit. And Keith Jackson comes on. And he talks about welcome to the granddaddy of a ball, and you wake up. You come out of your haze because Keith Jackson has spoken. Thou must pay attention.
There's a lovely shot of the Los Angeles Memorial. There's a lovely shot of the Rose Bowl from the Goodyear Blimp America.
Yes,
My God.
That was it. He was that dude, and yeah, they have totally screwed up the program, and thank God Keith Jackson's not around to see it.
Yeah, 2 Big 10 teams in this year's Rose Bowl. What a mess.
Yeah.
Well, Steve, this has been good. This has been a nice episode to come back to.
Yeah, it's a nice way to ring in the new year. Like you said, season 2. We're gonna keep this thing going, and hang with us because it's gonna be a fun ride.
Join with us next week as we talk about technology, specifically how we listen to music. And if you thought there was some pimping talked about today, you got nothing till next week. Till then, for Steve, I'm Bill, and this has been another episode of But Before We Go. Take care, everybody.